Have you noticed what's actually getting expensive lately? It's not luxury, it's the basics. A plain cotton t-shirt, a simple microwave, kids' toys that feel like they're made of air and hope. I want to ask a question, not as a policy expert, but as a consumer. If supply chains were moved to reduce risk, why does everything now carry a permanent markup? The answer is cold. Your cheap stuff didn't get safer, it got repriced. Friendshoring is often described in official circles as the removal of risk, but in practice, it functions like a subscription you never signed up for, yet are forced to pay every month. It is a bundle of security plans, compliance audits, and redundancy buffers. In 2026, this price of trust is eroding household balance sheets through three quiet structural shifts. 1. Origin arbitrage. Supply chains aren't leaving, they're taking a detour. 2. The just-in-case pivot, moving from lean efficiency to expensive disaster readiness. 3. The trust tax, the invisible markups buried in paperwork, audits, and financing. Part 1. From efficiency dividends to insurance premiums. Friendshoring sounds simple. Move production to countries that feel safer, more aligned, and less volatile. But here is the core misconception. Friendshoring is not leaving a supplier. It is leaving an exposure profile. Think of it like housing. You used to live in a rough neighborhood with dirt-cheap rent. Now, for safety, you've moved to a gated community. The house is the same size, but your rent has doubled. That is friendshoring. The global trade logic has shifted. The old model, optimized for maximum unit cost efficiency and just-in-time delivery. The new model, optimized for continuity under stress and just-in-case redundancy. In financial terms, friendshoring isn't de-risking, it is re-insuring. And insurance premiums don't appear as a line item on your receipt, they dissolve into the price of the goods. When you hear supply chains are moving, the real question isn't where. It's this. Are they actually leaving? Or are they just taking a longer, more expensive route to the same inputs? Part 2. The loop of origin arbitrage. Here is the part most people miss. The labels changed, but the blood didn't. A vast amount of friendshoring is not China disappearing. It is China moving one step upstream. This is what we call origin arbitrage. The flow works like this. 1. Upstream stays. Put. Core components and raw materials are still produced in the original hubs. 2. The final stamp moves. These goods are shipped to Vietnam or Mexico for the final 10% of assembly and packaging. 3. The West pays the premium. The product enters the US or Europe with a friendly label. The chain is longer. The stops are more frequent. Each node adds a new layer of cost. China provides the ingredients. A third country cooks the meal, and the Western consumer pays restaurant prices for what used to be cafeteria food. The data is undeniable. By 2024, U.S. imports from Mexico reached $505 billion. But look at the blood. UN Comtrade analysis shows that ASEAN's imports from China rose by 43% in the same period, 3/4 of which were intermediate and capital goods. This reveals a cynical truth. Firms do not think in flags, they think in constraints. Leaving actually means paying a premium for a more complex detour to maintain a dependency that is too critical to cut. Part 3. The 5 Markup Ledger. Let's dismantle your receipt. This isn't abstract inflation, it's an audit ledger. Markup 1. The redundancy premium. The old model was one best supplier. The new model is backup options, more warehousing, more idle inventory. A sofa now carries storage rent before it's even sold. Markup 2. The compliance premium. Rules of origin, supplier audits, and sanctions screening. Compliance doesn't improve the product. It only proves the product is legal. You aren't buying a shirt. You are buying administrative certainty. Markup 3. The financing premium. Longer chains mean capital is tied up for longer. In a high interest rate environment, redundancy is no longer a safety net. It's a luxury. Markup 4. The logistics premium. Every reroute means more handling, more insurance, and more delay. The product didn't change, but it became more insured and slower. Markup 5. The policy premium. Tariffs are the most visible part. By late 2025, the effective U.S. tariff rate reached roughly 19.5%, the highest in decades. There is no free lunch. This is a societal security subscription. Part 4. Why this feels so frustrating. At this point, a reasonable person asks a reasonable question. Why does it feel like we're paying more without actually feeling safer? This is where the emotional disconnect comes from. Security in theory is about reducing future shocks, but security in practice is paid for in the present. You don't feel the war that didn't happen. You don't feel the supply disruption that was avoided. You don't feel the factory that didn't shut down. What you feel is the receipt. That creates a psychological gap. Households are asked to absorb higher prices today in exchange for risks that are abstract, probabilistic, and delayed. And humans are bad at pricing avoided disasters. If a bridge collapses, everyone understands the cost. If a bridge doesn't collapse because it was reinforced, all you notice is the tax bill. Friendshoring lives in that invisible space. It doesn't promise abundance. It promises continuity. And continuity is hard to celebrate when wages lag, rents rise, and everyday goods quietly reset upward. This is why public debate often feels angry, but unfocused. People aren't rejecting safety. They're reacting to a system that moved risk from headlines into household budgets without a clear conversation about trade-offs. From a policy perspective, the logic is legible. From a consumer perspective, it feels like punishment without explanation. That tension is not ideological, it's structural. And once you see it that way, the price increases stop feeling random. They start to look like the monthly fee for living inside a more cautious world. Part 5. The trade-off. Nobody advertised. Let's be honest about something policymakers rarely say out loud. When people complain about prices, they're not wrong, but they are often reacting to a trade-off they were never told they were making. For 30 years, the global system made a promise. Maximum efficiency, minimum cost, and someone else absorbs the risk. That promise is over. Friendshoring is not a mistake. It is a conscious decision to pay more. So fewer things break all at once. But here's the uncomfortable part. You don't get to vote on which risks you insure against. You only get the bill. What you see is the price tag. And because prices are visible while avoided disasters are invisible, it feels like you're being punished for someone else's decisions. That's why this moment feels unfair. Not because the logic is wrong, but because the cost is personal and the benefit is abstract. In the old system, efficiency hid risk. In the new system, safety exposes cost. Neither world is free, they just charge you in different ways. This is the transition tax. And once you see it that way, the frustration doesn't disappear, but it becomes legible. Part 6. Who wins, who pays? This isn't a story of villains, but of incentives. Friendshoring creates winners. Compliance firms, logistics giants, and industrial parks in trusted countries. In a trust-based supply chain, trust becomes a high-margin industry. And who pays? Consumers. Through higher baseline prices. Taxpayers. Through subsidies for industrial policy. Small businesses. Large firms hire legal teams. Small firms drown in forms. Here is the cold truth. If the ingredients and the technology still come from the same place, we haven't removed the risk of a heart attack. We've just bought a more expensive ambulance. This is the hard constraint of our era. You can optimize for the cheapest supply chain or the safest one. You cannot have both. Friendshoring isn't irrational. In a world where trade is no longer just trade, it is perhaps even necessary. But the cost is real. A basic t-shirt is no longer just cotton and stitching. It is a small payment into a system that values continuity over efficiency. The real question isn't whether friendshoring works. It's what kind of economy we are building when the premium of trust becomes a permanent line item in human survival. Stay curious. Stay sharp.